Chapter 56. The clever Ch'un and Pao-ch'ai increases their income and removes long-standing abuses. The worthy Pao-ch'ai preserves intact, by the display of a little intelligence, the great reputation enjoyed by the Ch'ai family. But let's pick up the clue of our story. The Arab bore Lady Feng company during her meal. Then, attending to her while she rinsed her mouth and washed her hands, she betook herself eventually to Tan Chen's quarters, where she discovered the courtyard in perfect stillness. Not a soul was about beyond several maids, matrons in close attendance of the inner rooms, who stood outside the windows on the alert to obey any calls. Pinnier stepped into the hall. The two cousins and their sister-in-law were all three engaged in discussing some domestic affairs. They were talking about the feast, to which they had been invited during the New Year festivities by Lena's wife, and various details in connection with the garden she had in her place. But as soon as Ping Arab appeared on the scene, Tan Chen desired her to seat herself on her footstool. "What was exercising my mind," she thereupon observed, "confines itself to this. I was computing that the head, oil, and rouge and powder we used during the course of a month are also a matter of a couple of taels, and I was thinking that what with the sum of 2 taels already allotted us every month, and the extra monthly amount given as well to the maids, allowances are, with the addition again of that of 8 taels for school expenses we recently spoke about, piled to be sure one upon another. The thing is, it's true, a mere trifle, and the amount only a bagatelle, but it doesn't seem to be quite proper. But how is it that your mistress didn't take this into account?" Pinnier smiled. "There's a why and a wherefore," she answered. "All the things required by you, young ladies, must absolutely be subject to a fixed rule, for the different compradors have to lay in a stock of each every month, and to send them to us by the maids to take charge of, but purely and simply to keep in readiness for you to use. No such thing could keep in readiness for you to use. No such thing ever be tolerated as that each of us should have to get money every day and try and hunt up someone to go and buy these articles for us. That's how it is that the compradors outside receive a lump sum, and that they send us month by the female servants the supplies allotted for the different rooms. As regards the 2 taels monthly allowed you, young ladies, they were not originally intended that you should purchase any such articles with, but that you should, if at any time the ladies in charge of the household affairs happen to be away from home or to have no leisure, be saved the trouble of having to go in search of the proper persons in the event of your suddenly finding yourselves in need of money. This was done simply because it was feared that you would be subjected to inconvenience. But an unprejudiced glance about me now shows me that at least half of our young mistresses in the various quarters invariably purchase these things with ready money of their own. So I can't help suspecting that if it isn't a question of the compradors shirking their duties, it must be that what they buy is all mere rubbish." Ch'un and Wan laughed. "You must have kept a sharp lookout to have managed to detect these things," they said. "But as for shirking the purchases, they don't actually do so. It's simply that they're behind time by a good number of days. Yet when one puts on the screw with them, they get some articles from somewhere or other, who knows where. These are, however, only a sham, for, in reality, they aren't fit for use. But as they're now as ever obtained with cash down, a couple of taels could very well be given to the brothers or sons of some of the other people's nurses to purchase them with. They'll then be good for something. Were we, however, to employ any of the public domestics in the establishment, the things will be just as bad as ever. I wonder how they do manage to get such utter rot as they do. The purchases of the compradors may be what they are," Pinnier smiled. "But were anyone else to buy any better articles, the compradors themselves won't ever forgive them. Besides other things, they'll that they harbor evil designs, and that they wish to deprive them of their posts. That's how it comes about that the servants would much rather give offense to you all inside by getting inferior things, and that they have no desire to hurt the feelings of the managers outside by purchasing anything of superior quality. But if you young ladies requisition the services of the nurses, these men won't have the arrogance to make any nonsensical remarks. This accounts for the unhappy state my heart is in. Nate and Ch'un observed. But as we're called upon to squander money right and left, and as the things purchased are half of them uselessly thrown away, wouldn't it, after all, be better for us to eliminate this monthly allowance to the compradors? This is the first thing. The next I'd like to ask you is this. When they went during the New Year festivities to Lei Ta's house, you also went with them. And what do you think of that small garden as compared with this of ours? It isn't half as big as ours. Ping laughingly explained, the trees and plants are likewise fewer by a good deal. When I was having a chat with their daughter, teenage and proceeded, she said that besides the flowers they wear, and the bamboo shoots, vegetables, fish, and shrimps they eat from this garden of theirs, there's still enough every year for people to take over under contract, and that at the close of each year there's a surplus in full of 200 taels. Ever since that day is it that I've become alive to the fact that even a broken lotus leaf and a blade of withered grass are alike worth money. This is, in very truth, the withered proof. Way wealthy and well-to-do people talk. But notwithstanding your honorable position, young ladies, you really understand nothing about these concerns. Yet haven't you, with all your book lore, seen anything of the passage in the writing of Chu Fu-tzu? Throw not thyself away. I've read it. It's true, Tenshin smiled, but its object is simply to urge people to exert themselves. It's as much empty talk as any random arguments, and how could it be bodily treated as gospel? She's like all as much empty talk as any random arguments, Pao-ch'ai exclaimed. Why, every sentence in it is founded on fact. You've only had the management of affairs in your hands for a couple of days, and already greed and ambition have so beclouded your mind that you've come to look upon Jujutsu as full of fraud and falsehood. But when you by and by go out into the world and see all those mighty concerns reeking with greed and corruption, you'll even go so far as to treat Confucius himself as a fraud. Haven't you, with all your culture, read a book like that of Chizu's Panchun laughed. Su said in bygone days, that when one descends into the arena where gain and emoluments are to be got, and enters the world of planning and plotting, one makes light of the injunctions of Yayo and Shun, and disregards the principles inculcated by Confucius and Mencius. What about the next line? I now cut the text short, and H.N. smilingly rejoined, in order to adapt the sense to what I want to say, would I recite the following sentence, and heap abuse upon my own self? Is it likely I would? There's nothing under the heavens that can't be turned to some use, Pao-ch'ai, I added. And since everything can be utilized, everything must be worth money. But can it be that a person gifted with such intelligence as yours can have had no experience in such great matters and legitimate concerns as these? You send for a person, Lai Wan laughingly interposed, and you don't speak about what's right and proper, but you start an argument on learning. Learning is right and proper, Pao-ch'ai answered. If we made no allusion to learning, we'd all soon enough drift among the rustic herd. The trio bandied words for a while, after which they turned their attention again to pertinent affairs. And H.N. took up once more the thread of the conversation. This garden of ours, she argued, is only half as big as theirs, so if you double the income they derive, you will see that we ought to reap a net profit of 400 taels a year. But were we also now to secure a contract for our surplus products, the money we'd earn would, of course, be a mere trifle, and not one that a family like ours should hanker after. And were we to depute special persons to attend to the garden, the least permission given by them to anyone to turn anything to improper uses would, since there be so many things of intrinsic value, be tantamount to a reckless destruction of the gifts of heaven. So would it not be preferable to select several quiet, steady, and experienced old matrons out of those stationed in the grounds and appoint them to put them in order and look after things? Neither will there be any need then to make them pay any rent, or give any need then to make them pay. All we can ask them is to supply the household with whatever they can afford during the year. In the first place, the garden will, with special persons to look after the plants and trees, naturally so improve from year to year that there won't be any bustle or confusion whenever the time draws nigh to utilize the grounds. Secondly, people won't venture to injure or uselessly waste anything. In the third place, the old matrons themselves will, by availing themselves of these small perquisites, not labor in the gardens year after year and day after day, all for no good. Fourthly, it will, in like manner, be possible to effect a saving in the expenditure for gardeners, rockery, layers, sweepers, and other necessary servants. And this excess can be utilized for making up other deficiencies. I don't see any reason why this shouldn't be practicable. Pao-ch'ai was standing below contemplating the pictures with characters suspended on the walls. Upon hearing these suggestions, she readily nodded her head assentingly and smiled. "Excellent," she cried. "Within 3 years, there will be no more famines and deaths." "What a first-rate plan," Lai Wan chimed in. "This, if actually adopted, will delight the heart of Madame Wang. Pecuniary economies are of themselves a paltry matter, but there will be then in the garden those to sweep the grounds, and those whose special charge will be to look after them. Besides, were the persons selected allowed to turn up an honest cash by selling part of the products, they will be so impelled by a sense of their responsibilities and prompted by a desire of gain that there won't any longer be any who won't acquit themselves of their duties to the fullest measure. It remained for you, miss, to put these suggestions in words," Ping Er remarked. "Our mistress may have entertained the idea, but it is by no means certain that she thought it nice on her part to give utterance to it. For as you young ladies live at present in the garden, she could not possibly, unable as she is to supply such additional ornaments as will make it more showy, contrariwise depute people to exercise authority in it, and to keep it in order with a view of effecting a reduction in expenses. Such a proposal could never have dropped from her lips." Pao-ch'ai advanced up to her with alacrity, rubbing her face. "Open that mouth of yours wide," she laughed, "and let me see of what stuff your teeth and tongue are made. Ever since you put your foot out of bed this morning, you've jabbered away up to this very moment. And your song has all been in one strain. For neither have you been very complimentary to Miss Tertia, nor have you admitted that your mistress is, as far as wits go, so much below the mark as to be unable to effect suitable provision. Yet whenever Miss Tertia advanced any arguments, you've at once made use of endless words to join issue with her. This is because the plan devised by Miss Tertia was also hit upon by your Lady Feng. But there must surely have been a reason why she couldn't carry it into execution. Again, as the young ladies have now their quarters in the garden, she couldn't, with any decency, direct anyone to go and rule over it, for the mere sake of saving a few cash. Just consider this. If the garden is actually handed to people to make profit out of it, the parties interested will, of course, not even permit a single spray of flowers to be plucked and not a single fruit to be taken away. With such as come within the category of senior young ladies, they won't naturally have the audacity to be particular, but they'll daily have endless rows of the junior girls. Lady Feng has, with her fears about the future and her misgivings about the present, shown herself neither too overbearing nor too servile. This mistress of theirs is not friendly disposed towards us, but when she hears of her various proposals, shame might induce her to turn over a new leaf. Early this morning, Tinshu laughingly observed, "I was very cross, but as soon as I heard of her King Heir's arrival, I casually remembered that her mistress employed, during her time, such domestics as were up to all kinds of larks. And at the sight of her, I got more cross than ever. But little though one would have thought it, she behaved from the moment she came, like a rat that tries to get out of the way of a cat. And as she had had to stand for ever so long, I pitied her very much." But she took up the thread of the conversation and went on to spin that long yarn of hers. Yet, instead of mentioning that her mistress treats me with every consideration, she, on the contrary, observed, "The kindness with which you have all along dealt with Our Lady, miss, has not been to no purpose." This remark, therefore, not only dispelled my anger, but filled me with so much shame that I began to feel sore at heart. And when I came to think carefully over the matter, I failed to see how I, a mere girl who had personally done so much mischief that not a soul cared a stroll for me and not a soul took any interest in me, could possess any such good qualities as to treat anyone kindly. When she reached this point, she could not check her tears from brimming over. Lai Wan and her associates perceived how pathetically she spoke, and recalling to mind how Mrs. Kao had always run her down, and how she had ever been involved in some mess or other with Mei Wang on account of this Mrs. Kao, they too found it difficult to refrain from melting into sobs. But they then used their joint efforts to console her. "Let's avail ourselves of this quiet day," they suggested, "to try and find out how we could increase our revenue and remove abuses so as not to render futile the charge laid on us by Madam Wang. What use or purpose is it to allude to such trivial matters? I've already grasped your object, Ping Er hastily ventured. Miss, speak out. Who do you consider fit? And as soon as the proper persons have been fixed upon, everything will be square enough." "What you say is all very well," and Ch'un rejoined, "but it will be necessary to let your lady know something about it. It has never been the proper thing for us in here to scrape together any small profits. But as your mistress is full of gumption, I adopted the course I did. Had she been at all narrow-minded, with many prejudices and many jealousies, I wouldn't have shown the least willingness in the matter. But as it will look as if I were bent upon pulling her to pieces, how can I take action without consulting her? In that case," Ping Er smiled, "I'll go and tell her something about it." With this response, she went on the errand, and only returned after a long lapse of time. I said, she laughed, that it would be perfectly useless for me to go. However could Our Lady not readily accede to an excellent proposal like this? Hearing this, Anachan forthwith joined Li Wan in directing a servant to ask for the roll, containing the names of the matrons in the garden, and bring it to them. When produced, they all held council together, and fixing cursorily upon several persons, they summoned them to appear before them. Lai Wan explained to them the general outline of their duties, and not one was there among the whole company who listened to her who would not undertake the charge. One said, "If you confide that bamboo tree for 12 months to my care, it will again next year be a single tree. But besides, the shoots which will have been eaten at home, I shall be able, in the course of the year, to also pay in some money." "Hand me over," another one remarked, "that portion of paddy field, and there will, during the year, be no need to touch any public funds on account of the various birds, large and small, which are kept for mere fun. Besides that, I shall be in a position to give in something more." And Chen was about to pass a remark when a servant reported that the doctor had come, and that he had entered the garden to see Miss Shi. So the matrons were obliged to go and usher the doctor in. "Were there 100 of you?" Here, promptly expostulated Ping Er, "You wouldn't know what propriety means. Are there perchance no couple of housekeepers about to push themselves forward and see the doctor in?" "There's Dame Wu and Dame Chen," the servant who brought the message replied. "The two are on duty at the southwest corner at the accumulated splendor gate." At this answer, Ping Er allowed the subject to drop. After the departure of the matrons, Ch'un inquired of Pao-ch'ai, and she inquired of Pao-ch'ai what she thought of them. "Such as are diligent at the outset," Pao-ch'ai answered, smiling, "become remiss in the end, and those who have a glib tongue have an eye to gain." Ch'un listened to her reply, and nodding her head, she extolled its wisdom. Then, showing them with her fingers several names on the list, she submitted them for the perusal of the trio. Ping Er speedily went and fetched a pen and ink slab. "This old mother Chu, the trio observed, is a trustworthy woman. What's more, this old dame and her sons have generation after generation done the sweeping of the bamboo groves. So let's now place the various bamboo trees under her control." This old mother Tian was originally a farmer, and everything in the way of vegetables and rice in and about the Toaxiang village should, albeit they couldn't, planted as they are as a mere pastime, be treated in such earnest as to call for large works and extensive plantations be entrusted to her care. For wouldn't they fare better if she can be on the spot and tend them with extra diligence at the proper times and seasons? What a pity it is. Ch'un proceeded smilingly, "That two places so spacious as the Hengwu Garden and the Ihun Court bring no grit to the mill. Things in the Hengwu Garden are in a worse state. Laiwan hastily interposed. Aren't the scented wares, and scented herbs sold at present everywhere in perfumery shops, large fairs, and great temples, the very counterpart of these things here. So if you reckon up, you will find how much greater return these articles will give than any other kind of product. As for the Aihang Ko, we needn't mention other things, but only take into account the roses that bud during the 2 seasons of spring and summer. To how many don't they amount in all? Besides these, we've got along the whole hedge, cinnamon roses and monthly roses, stock roses, honey, suckle, and wisteria. Were these various flowers dried and sold to the tea and medicine shops, they'd also fetch a good deal of money. Quite so. And Ch'un acquiesced with a smile. The thing is that there's no one with any notion how to deal with scented herbs. There's Yin waits on Miss Pao. Her mother is well versed in these things. It was only the other day that she plucked a few and plaited them after drying them well in the sun into a flower basket and a gourd, and gave them to me to play with. But Miss Can, you have forgotten all about it. I was this very minute speaking in your praise, Pao. Shay! Oh, Shay. Observed smiling. Do you come to chaff me? What makes you say so? Exclaimed the trio in utter astonishment. It will on no account do, Pao-ch'ai added. You employ such a lot of people in here that they all lead a lazy life and have nothing to put a hand to, and were I also now to introduce some more, the tribe will look even upon me with utter contempt. But let me think of someone for you. There's in the Aihang court an old dame. Yeah, she's Pei Ming's mother. That woman is an honest old lady, and is furthermore on the best of terms with our Yinger's mother. So, wouldn't it be, well, were this charge given to this dame? Yeah. Should there even be anything that she doesn't know, there would be no necessity for us to tell her. She can go straightway and consult with Ying Era's mother. And if she can't attend to everything herself, it won't matter to whom she relegates some of her duties. These will be purely private favors. In the event, too, of anyone making any mean insinuations, the blame won't fall on our shoulders. By adopting this course, you'll be managing things in such a way as to do extreme justice to all. And the trust itself will also be placed on a most satisfactory footing. Excellent! Ejaculated Li Wan and Finger simultaneously. This may be well and good, and Achen laughed. But the fear is that, at the sight of gain, they'll forget all about propriety. That's nothing to do with us, Finger rejoined, a smile playing about her lips. It was only the other day that Ying recognized Dane, as her adopted mother, and invited her to eat and drink with them, so that the two families are on the most intimate terms. At this assurance, Ch'un relinquished the topic of conversation, and holding counsel together, they selected several persons, all of whom the four had ever viewed with impartial favor, and they marked off their names by dotting them with a pen. In a little while, the matrons came to report that the doctor had gone, and they handed the prescription. Their three mistresses then perused its contents. On the one hand, they dispatched domestics to take it outside so that the drugs should be got, and to superintend their decoction. On the other, Ch'un and Li Wan explicitly explained to the various servants chosen what particular place each had to look after. Exclusive, they added, of what fixed custom requires for home consumption during the 4 seasons. You are still at liberty to pluck whatever remains and have it taken away. As for the profits, we'll settle accounts at the close of the year. I've also bethought myself of something. Ch'un smiled. If the settlement of accounts takes place at the end of the year, the money will, at the time of delivery, be naturally paid into the accountancy. Those high up will then, as usual, add a whole lot of controllers. And these will, on their part, fleece their own share as soon as the money gets into the palms of their hand. But as by this system we've now initiated, you've been singled out for appointment. You've already ridden so far above their heads that they foster all sorts of animosity against you. They don't, however, give vent to their feelings, but if they don't seize the close of the year when you have to deliver your accounts to play their tricks on you, well, what other chances will they wait? Moreover, they obtain, in everything that comes under their control during the year, half of every share their masters get. This is an old custom. Everyone is aware of its existence. But this is a new regime I now introduce in this garden, so don't let the money find its way into their hands. Whenever the annual settling of accounts arrives, bring them in to us. My idea is, Pao-ch'ai smilingly suggested, that no accounts need be handed, even inside. This one will have a surplus. That one, deficit, so that it will involve no end of trouble. Wouldn't it be better, therefore, if we were to find out who of them would take over this or that particular kind and let them purvey the various things? These are for the exclusive use of the inmates of the garden, and I've already made an estimate of them for you. They amount to just a few sorts and simply consist of head, oil, rouge powder, and scented paper, in all of which the young ladies and maids are subject to a fixed rule. Then, besides these, there are the brooms, dust baskets, and poles, wanted in different localities, and the food for the large and small animals and birds, and the deer and rabbits. These are the only kinds of things required. And if they contract for them, there'll be little need for anyone to go to the accountancy for money. But just calculate what a saving will thus be effected. All these items are, I admit, mere trifles, Pinga smiled. But if you lump together what's used journey here, you will find that a saving of 400 taels will be effected. Again, smilingly remarked Pao-ch'ai will leave 400 taels in 1 year, but 800 taels in 2 years. And with these, we could purchase a few more houses and let them. And in the way of poor sandy land, we could also add several acres to those we've already got. There will, of course, still remain a surplus. But as they will have ample trouble and inconvenience to put up with during the year, they should also be allowed some balance in hand, so as to make up what's wanted for themselves. The main object is, of course, to increase profits and curtail expenses, yet we couldn't be stingy to any excessive degree. In fact, were we even able to make any further economy of over 200 or 300 taels, it would never be the proper thing. Should this involve a breach of the main principles of decorum? With this course duly put into practice, outside the accountancy will issue in 1 year 400 or 500 taels less, without even the semblance of any parsimony, while inside the matrons will obtain, on the other hand, some little thing to supply their wants with. The nurses, who have no means of subsistence, will likewise be placed in easy circumstances. And the plants and trees in the garden will year by year increase in strength and grow more abundantly. In this wise, you too will have such articles as will be fit for use, so that this plan will, to some extent, not constitute a breach of the high principles of propriety. And if everyone we want to retrench a little more from where won't we be able to get money? But if the whole balance, if any, be put to the credit of the public fund, everyone, inside as well as outside, will fill the streets with the din of murmurings. And won't this be then a slur upon the code of honor of a household such as yours? So were any charge to be entrusted to this one, out of the several tens of old nurses at present employed in the garden, and not to that one, the remainder will naturally resent such injustice. As I said a while back, all that these women will have to provide among themselves amounts to a few articles, so they will unavoidably have ample means. Hence, each should be told to contribute, beyond the articles that fall to her share during the year, a certain number of taels, whether she may or may not realize any balance, and then jointly lump these sums together and distribute them among those nurses only on service in the garden. For although they may not have anything to do with the control of these things, they themselves will have to stay in the grounds to keep an eye over the servants on duty, to shut the doors, to close the windows, and to get up early and retire late. Whenever it rains in torrents, or it snows hard and chairs have to be carried for you young ladies to go out and come in, or boats have to be punted and sledges drawn, these rough and arduous duties come alike within their sphere of work. They have to labor in the garden from 1 year's end to the other, and though they earn something in those grounds, it's only right that they should able to get some small benefits in the discharge of their legitimate duties. But there's another most trivial point that I would broach with less reserve. If you only think of your ease, and don't share the profits with them, they will, of course, never presume to show their displeasure, but in their hearts they won't cherish you any good feeling. What they'll do will be to make public business a pretext to serve their own private ends with, They'll pluck more of your fruits than they should, and cut greater quantities of your flowers than they ought. And you people will have a grievance, but you won't have anywhere to go and confide it. But should they too reap some gain, they'll readily look after such things on your behalf as you won't have the time to attend to. The matrons listened to her explanations, and finding that they would be removed from the control of the accountancy, that they would not be compelled to go and settle accounts with Lady Fang, and that all that they would be called upon to do every year would be to supply a few more tea hours, were each and all delighted to an exceptional degree. So much so that every one of them exclaimed in a chorus that they were quite prepared to agree to the terms. It is better, they said, than to be obliged to go out and be squeezed by them, and to have to fork out our own money as well. Those two not entrusted with the care of any portion of land were also highly elated when they heard that at the close of each year they would, though they had no valet, come into some share of hard cash. They'll have to bear the trouble, they however argued, to keep things in order, so it's only right that they should be left with a few cash to meet their various wants with. And how could we very well gobble our 3 meals without doing a stroke of work? Games? Pao-ch'ai smiled. You mustn't decline. These duties are within your province, and you should fulfill them. All you need do is to exert yourselves a bit by day and night, and not be so remiss and careless as to suffer any of the servants to drink and gamble. That's all. Otherwise, I myself must have nothing to do with the control. But you, yourselves, know well enough that it's my aunt who appealed to me with her own lips 3 and 5 times to do it as a favor to her. Your eldest sister-in-law, she represented, has at present no leisure, and the other girls are young. And then she asked me to look after things. So if I now don't intercede, it's as clear as day that I shall be the cause of much worry to my aunt. Our Lady Feng herself is seriously ill, and our domestic affairs can't hang fire. I'm really with nothing to do, so we're even a mere neighbor to solicit my help. I would also feel bound to lend her a hand in her pressure of work. How much more, therefore, when it's my own aunt who invokes my aid? Setting aside the way I'm execrated by one and all, how would I ever be able to stare my aunt in the face if, while I gave my sole mind to winning fame and fishing for praise, anyone got so intoxicated and lost so much in gambling as to stir up trouble? At such a juncture, remorse on your part will be too late. Even the old reputation you have ever enjoyed will entirely be lost and gone. Those young ladies and girls in this vast garden are placed under your supervision, purely and simply because one takes into account that you have been nurses to 3 or 4 generations, and that you have most scrupulously observed the rules of etiquette and propriety. It's but fair that you should try with one mind and show some little regard for what's right and proper. But if you contrariwise behave with such laxity as to let people gratify their wishes by guzzling and gambling, and my aunt comes to hear of these nice doings, a little scolding from her will be of little consequence. But if the various women who attend to the household get scent of the state of affairs, they will haul you over the coals, without even so much as breathing one single word beforehand to my aunt. And venerable people, though you are, you will then, instead of tendering advice to young people, be called to account by them. As housekeepers, they exercise, it's true, authority over you. But why shouldn't you yourselves observe a certain amount of decorum? And if you do so, will they have any occasion to bully you? The reason why I've now bethought myself of this special boon for you is that you should unanimously strain every nerve to diligently attend to the garden, in order that the powers that be may, at the sight of your unrelenting care and zeal, have no cause to give way to solicitude. And won't they inwardly look up to you with regard? Neither will you render of no effect the various benefits devised for them. But go now and minutely ponder over all my advice. All the women received her words with gratification. What you say is quite right, they replied. From this time forth, you, miss, and you, our lady, can well compose your minds. With the interest both of you feel on our behalf, may heaven and earth not spare us, if we do not display a full amount of gratitude for all your kindnesses. These assurances were still being uttered when they saw Lin Chi, Xiaxia's wife, walk in. The family of the Chen mansion of Xiangnan, she explained, arrived in the capital yesterday. Today, they're going into the palace to offer their congratulations. But they've now sent messengers ahead to come and bring presents and pay their respects. While she spoke, she produced the list of presents and handed it up. And Ch'un took it over from her. They consist, she said, perusing it, of 12 rolls of brocades and satins embroidered with dragons. Satins embroidered with dragons, such as are for imperial use. 12 rolls of satins of various colors, of the kind worn by the emperor. 12 rolls of every sort of imperial gauze, 12 rolls of palace silks of the quality used by His Majesty, and 20 rolls of satins, gauzes, silks, and thin silks of different colors, generally worn by officials. After glancing over the list, Lai Wan and an Ch'un suggested that a first-class tip should be given to the messengers who brought them, after which they went on to direct a servant to convey the tidings to Dowager Lady Chia. Old Lady Chia gave orders to call Lai Wan and Ch'un, Pao-ch'ai, and the other girls. On their arrival, the presents were passed under review, and this over, Li Wan put them aside. "You must wait," she said to the servants of the inner storeroom, "until Madame Wan comes back and sees them. You can then lock them up. This Chen family," to Old Lady Chia thereupon added, "isn't like any other family. The highest tip should therefore be conferred upon the men. But as in a twinkle, they may also send some of their womankind to come and make their obeisance. Silks should be got ready in anticipation." Scarcely was this remark concluded before a domestic actually announced that 4 ladies of the Chen mansion had come to pay their respects. Upon hearing this, Dowager Lady Chia hastily directed that they should be introduced into her presence. The 4 women ranged from 40 years and over. Their clothing and headgear were not, in any material degree, different from those of mistresses. As soon as they presented their compliments and inquired about their healths, Old Lady Chia desired that 4 footstools should be moved forward. But though the 4 women thanked her for bidding them sit down, they only occupied the stools after Pao-ch'ai had seated herself. "When did you enter the capital?" Old Lady Chia inquired. The 4 women jumped to their feet. "With yesterday," they answered. "Our lady has to pay their homage. That's why she bade and see how the young ladies are getting alacrity. We entered the capital, taken our young lady today into the palace. U.S. come and give you their compliments on... You hadn't paid a visit to the capital for ever so many years," Dowager Lady Chia smilingly observed. "And here you appear now quite unexpectedly." The 4 women simultaneously smiled. "Again, quite so," they said. "We received this year imperial orders summoning us to the capital." "Has the whole family come?" Old Lady Chia asked. "Our old mistress, our young master, the 2 young ladies, and the other ladies haven't come up," the 4 women explained. "Only our lady has come, together with Miss Tertia. Is she engaged to anyone?" Old Lady Chia asked. "Not yet," rejoined the quartet. "The 2 families, that of your senior married lady and that of your lady Secunda, are both on most intimate terms with ours." Dowager Lady Chia smilingly added. "Yes, they are," replied the 4 women with a smile. "The letters received each year from our young ladies assure us that they're entirely dependent upon the kindness bestowed upon them in your worthy mansion for their well-being." "What kindness, Old Lady Chia?" exclaimed laughingly. "These 2 families are really friends of long standing. In addition to this, they're old relatives. So what we do is our simple bounden duty. What's more, in the favor of your 2 young ladies is that they're not full of their own importance. That's how it is that we've come to be on such close terms." The 4 women smiled. "This is mainly due to your venerable ladyship's excessive humility," they answered. "Is that young gentleman of yours too, with your old mistress?" Old Lady Chia went on to inquire. "Yes, he has also come with our old mistress," the 4 women retorted. "How old is he?" Old Lady Chia then asked. "Does he go to school?" she afterwards inquired. "He's 13 this year," the 4 women said by way of response. But all through those good looks of his, our old mistress cherishes him so fondly that from his youth up, he has been wayward to the extreme, and that he now daily plays the truant. But our master and mistress as well don't keep any great check over him. Yet, he can't resemble that young fellow of ours," Old Lady Chia laughed. "What's the name of your young gentleman?" "As our old mistress treats him just like a real precious gem," the quartet explained. and as his complexion is naturally so white, her ladyship calls him Pao. There's another one with the name of Pao. You, old lady Ch'ai, laughingly said to Lai Wan. Lai Wan and her companions hastily made a curtsy. There have been, from old times to the present, they smiled, very many among contemporaries and persons of different generations as well, who have borne duplicate names The 4 women also smiled. After the selection of this infant name, they proceeded. We all, both high or low, began to give way to surmises, as we could not make out in what relatives or friends' family there was a lad also called by the same name. But as we hadn't come to the capital for 10 years or so, we couldn't remember. That young fellow is my grandson, Dowager Lady Ch'ai remarked. Hello, someone come here. The married women and maids assented and approached several steps. Go into the garden, old Lady Ch'ai smilingly said, and call our Pao. You here, so that these 4 housekeeping dames should see how he compares with their own Pao Yu. The married women, upon hearing her orders, promptly went off. After a while, they entered the room, pressing round Pao. You. The moment the 4 dames caught sight of him, they speedily rose to their feet. He has given us such a start, they exclaimed smilingly. Had we not come into your worthy mansion, and perchance met him elsewhere, we would have taken him for our Pao, you, and followed him as far as the capital. While speaking, they came forward and took hold of his hands and assailed him with questions. Pao? You, however, also put on a smile and inquired after their healths. How do his looks compare with those of your young gentlemen? Dowager Lady Ch'ai asked as she smiled. The way the 4 dames ejaculated just now, Lai Wan and her companions explained, was sufficient to show how much they resemble in looks. How could there ever be such a coincidence? Old Lady Ch'ai laughed. Yet the children of wealthy families are so delicately nurtured that, unless their faces are so deformed as to make them downright ugly, they're all equally handsome, as far as general appearances go. So there's nothing strange in this. As we gaze at his features, the quartet added with smiling faces, we find him the very image of him. And from what we gather from your venerable ladyship, he's also like him in waywardness. But as far as we can judge, this young gentleman's disposition is ever so much better than that of ours. What makes you think so? Old Lady Ch'ai precipitately inquired. We saw it as soon as we took hold of the young gentleman's hands, the 4 women laughingly rejoined. And when he spoke to us, had it been that fellow of ours, he would have simply called us fools, not to speak of taking his hand in ours, while we daren't even slightly move any of his things. That's why those who wait on him are invariably young girls. Before the four dames had time to conclude what they had to say, Lai Wan and the rest found it so hard to check themselves that with one voice they burst into loud laughter. Old Lady Ch'ai also laughed. Let's also send someone now, she said, to have a look at your Pao. When his hand is taken, he too is sure to make an effort to put up with it. But don't you know that children of families such as yours and mine are bound, notwithstanding their numerous perverse and strange defects, to return the orthodox civilities when they come across any strangers? But should they not return the proper civilities, they should by no manner of means be suffered to behave with such perverseness. It's the way that grown-up people dote on them that makes them what they are, and as they can, what they are. And as they can, first and foremost, boast of bewitching good looks, and they comport themselves, secondly, towards visitors with all propriety. In fact, with less faulty deportment than their very seniors, they manage to win the love and admiration of such as only get a glimpse of them. Hence it is that they're secretly indulged to a certain degree. But if they don't show the least regard to anyone inside or outside, and so reflect no credit upon their parents, they deserve, with all their handsome looks, to be flogged to death. These sentiments evoked a smile from the 4 dames. Your words, venerable lady, they exclaimed, are quite correct. But though our Pao, you be wilful and strange in his ways, yet whenever he meets any visitors, he behaves with courteousness and good manners, so much so that he's more pleasing to watch than even grown-up persons. There is no one, therefore, who sees him without falling in love with him. But you'll say, Why is he then beaten? You really aren't aware that at home he has no regard either for precept or for heaven. That he comes out with things that never suggest themselves to the imagination of grown-up people, and that he comes out with things that never suggest themselves to the imagination of grown-up people, and that he does everything that takes one by surprise. The result is that his father and mother are driven to their wits' ends. But willfulness is natural to young children. Reckless expenditure is a common characteristic of young men. Antipathy to school is a common feeling with young people. Yet there are ways and means to bring him round. The worst with him is that his disposition is so crotchety and whimsical. Can this ever do? This reply was barely ended when a servant informed them that their mistress had returned. Madame Wang entered the room and saluted the women. The 4 dames paid their obeisance to her. But they had just had sufficient time to pass a few general observations when Dowager Lady Chia bade them go and rest. Madame Wang then handed the tea in person and withdrew from the apartment. But when the 4 dames got up to say good-bye, old Lady Chia adjourned to Madame Wang's quarters. After a chat with her on domestic affairs, she however told the women to go back. So let us put them by without any further allusion to them. During this while, old Lady Chia's spirits waxed so high that she told everyone and anyone she came across that there was another Pao-ch'ai, and that he was, in every respect, the very image of her grandson. But as each and all bore in mind that there were many inmates among the large households of those officials with official ancestors called by the same names, that it was an ordinary occurrence for a grandmother to be passionately fond of her grandson, and that there was nothing out of the way about it, they treated the matter as of no significance. Pao-ch'ai, however, was such a harebrained simpleton that he conjectured that the statements made by the 4 dames had been intended to flatter his grandmother Chia. But subsequently he betook himself into the garden to see how she, Siang Yun, was getting on. Compose your mind now, Siang, Yun then said to him, and go on with your larks. Once you were as lonely as a single fiber which can't be woven into thread, and like a single bamboo which can't form a grove, but now you've found your pair. When you exasperate your parents and they get you beans, you'll be able to bolt to Nanking in quest of the other Pao. You, what utter rubbish, Pao-ch'ai exclaimed. Don't you believe that there's another Pao? You? How is it, Siang Yun asked, that there was someone in the Li estate called Lin Xiangju, and that during the Han Dynasty there lived again another person, whose name was Su Mahasheng? Ju, this matter of names is all well enough, Pao-ch'ai rejoined with a smile. But as it happens, his very appearance is the counterpart of mine. Such a thing could never be. How is it, Xian? Yun inquired. That when the Qiwang people saw Confucius, they fancied it was Yang Hu. Confucius and Yang Hu. Pao, you smilingly argued, may have been alike in looks, but they hadn't the same names. Lin and Su were again, notwithstanding their identical names, nothing like each other in appearances. But can it ever be possible that he and I should resemble each other in both respects? Xian Yun was at a loss what reply to make to his argument. You may, she consequently remarked, smiling, propound any rubbish you like. I'm not in the humor to enter into any discussion with you. Whether there be one or not is quite immaterial to me. It doesn't concern me at all. Saying this, she lay herself down. Pao-ch'ai, however, began again to exercise his mind with further surmises. If I say he cogitated that there can't be one, there seems from all appearances to be one. And if I say that there is one, I haven't, on the other hand, seen him with my own eyes. Sad and dejected, he returned therefore to his quarters, and reclining on his couch, he silently communed with his own thoughts until he unconsciously became drowsy and fell fast asleep. Finding himself, in his dream, in some garden or other, Pao-ch'ai was seized with astonishment. Besides our own garden of Broad Vista, he reflected, is there another such garden? But while indulging in these speculations, several girls, all of whom were waiting, maids suddenly made their appearance from the opposite direction. Pao-ch'ai was again filled with surprise. Besides Yuan Yang, See Ch'un and Pao, he pondered. Are there verily such maidens as these? Pao, you, he heard that company of maids observe, with faces beaming with smiles, how is it you find yourself in here? Pao, you labored under the impression that they were addressing him. With hasty step, he consequently drew near them and returned their smiles. I got here, he answered quite listlessly. What old family friend's garden is this, I wonder? But sisters, pray take me for a stroll. The maids smiled with one consent. Really, they exclaimed. This isn't our Pao, but his looks too are spruce and nice, and he is as precocious too with his tongue. Pao, you caught their remarks. Sisters, he eagerly cried, is there actually a second Pao? You in here? As for the two characters Pao, you, the maid speedily explained. Everyone in our house has received our old mistress and our mistress' injunctions to use them as a spell to protract his life for many years and remove misfortune from his path, and when we call him by that name, he simply goes into ecstasies at the very mention of it. But you, young brat, from what distant parts of the world do you hail that you've recklessly been also dubbed by the same name? But beware lest we pound that frowsy flesh of yours into mincemeat. Let's be off at once, urged another maid as she smiled. Don't let our Pao, you see us here and say again that by hobnobbing with this stinking young fellow, we've been contaminated by all his pollution. With these words on her lips, they straightway walked off. Oh, you fell into a brown study. There's never been, he mused, anyone to treat me with such disdain before. But what is it, in fact, that induces them to behave towards me in this manner? May it not be true that there lives another human being, the very image of myself? While lost in reverie, he advanced with heedless step until he reached a courtyard. Pao, you were struck with wonder. Is there actually, he cried, besides the eye-hung court, another court like it? Spontaneously then, ascending the steps, he entered an apartment in which he discerned someone reclining on a couch. On the offside sat several girls busy at needlework, now laughing joyfully, now practicing their jokes. When he overheard the young person on the couch heave a sigh. How, you, smilingly inquired a maid. What, aren't you asleep? What are you once more sighing for? I presume it's because your sister is ill that you abandon yourself again to idle fears and immoderate anguish. These words fell on Pao's ears and took him quite aback. I've heard grandmother say. He overheard the young person on the couch observe that there lives at Chang'an, the capital, another Pao, you endowed with the same disposition as myself. I never believed what she told me, but I just had a dream, and in this dream I found myself in a garden of metropolis where I came across several maidens, all of whom called me a stinking young brat and would have nothing whatever to do with me. But after much difficulty, I succeeded in penetrating into his room. He happened to be fast asleep. There he lay like a mere bag of bones. His real faculties had flown somewhere or other, whither it was hard for me to say. Hearing this, I have come here, Pao, he said with alacrity in search of Pao. You? And are you indeed that Pao you? The young man on the couch jumped down with all haste and enfolded him in his arms. Are you verily Pao? You? He laughingly asked. This isn't by any means such stuff as dreams are made of. How can you call this a dream? Pao, you rejoined. It's reality, yeah, nothing but reality. But scarcely was this rejoinder over than he heard someone come and say, Our master, your father, wishes to see you, Pao. You? The two lads started with fear. One Pao. You rushed off with all dispatch. The other promptly began to shout, Pao, you! Come back at once! Pao, you be quick in return! P.C. Jen, who stood by Pao-yu, heard him call out his own name in his dreams, and immediately gave him a push and woke him up. Where's Pao? You gone to? She laughed. Although Pao-yu was by this time aroused from sleep, his senses were as yet dull, so pointing towards the door. He's just gone out, he replied. He's not far off. He's not far off. You're under the delusion of a dream, she said. Rub your eyes and look carefully. It's your reflection in the mirror. Pao cast a glance in front of him and actually caught sight of the large inlaid mirror facing him quite opposite, so he himself burst out laughing. But presently, a maid handed him a rinse, bouche, and tea and salt, and he washed his mouth. Little wonder is it, she ventured, if our old mistress has repeatedly enjoined that it isn't good to have too many mirrors about in young people's rooms. For as the spirit of young persons is not fully developed, there is every fear, with mirrors casting their reflections all over the place of their having wild dreams in their sleep. And is a bed now placed before that huge mirror there. When the covers of the mirrors are let down, no harm can befall. But as the season advances, and the weather gets hot, one feels so languid and tired, that is one likely to think of dropping. Then, just as it happened a little time back, it slipped entirely from your memory. Of course, when he first got into bed, he must have played with his face towards the glass. But upon shortly closing his eyes, he must naturally have fallen into such his confused dreams that they thoroughly upset his rest. Otherwise, how is it possible that he should have started shouting his own name? Would it not be as well if the bed were moved inside tomorrow? That's the proper place for it. Hardly had she, however, done before they perceived a servant sent by Madame Wang to call Pao Yu. But what she wanted to tell him is not yet known, so, reader, listen to the circumstances recorded in the subsequent chapter. End of book.